It's completely untrue to claim, as some Republicans do, that the British abandoned Australia in the Second World War. I'm David Flint and I'm from ACM. In a comment on a previous post on the bombing of Darwin, Rob Grant said this, quote, "Let's not forget the decision by your beloved Britain to withdraw troops from the Pacific exacerbated the situation in Darwin. When push came to shove, Australia was expendable." Mr. Grant continues, suggesting that the communist-controlled warfields and their despicable actions is in any way related to republicanism is an overreach even for ACM. Well, Mr. Grant is wrong. His was a reply to a post commemorating the bombing of Darwin in 1942, during which 8 ships were sunk and about 15 others badly damaged. At least 243 people were killed. The militancy on the Darwin waterfront was a matter of serious concern, not least for the Americans. For example, they had complained to the government that the Holbrook, with an American artillery equipment on board, had waited for 3 weeks before the equipment could be taken off. And this wasn't an isolated instance. And not only did they constantly create unreasonable delays on the Australian waterfront, wharf labourers would damage equipment while loading. These communists, who planned to turn Australia into a Soviet or People's Republic, escaped punishment for their treachery. The consequences were tragic. According to Hal Colbatch, writing in Australia's Secret War, published in 2013, the communist-controlled Darwin wharf labourers can be held directly responsible for the scale of the resultant carnage when the Japanese struck. This was because so many ships were caught in Darwin because of the Union practices on the Darwin waterfront. And as for the British, they did not, as Mr. Grant wrongly claims, withdraw their troops from the Pacific. Now, the British had been forced out of Malaysia and Singapore, as the Americans had been forced out of the Philippines, the Dutch out of Indonesia, and the French out of Indochina. After the Battle of Singapore, the British did not, as Mr. Grant claims, withdraw their troops. The Japanese held them in appalling conditions as prisoners of war, along with Australian and other soldiers. The British had also suffered heavy naval losses in the defense of Singapore. But they kept on fighting for the rest of the war in India and Burma, and they also maintained a strong naval presence in Ceylon. Now, in the Second World War, the Allies, principally the United States and the United Kingdom, appointed 4 Supreme Allied Commanders in the major theatres of the war. Lord Mountbatten was appointed Supreme Allied Commander, Southeast Asia, an unlikely appointment if there were no British forces there. So you had a British Supreme Allied Commander in Southeast Asia. There was a Supreme Allied Commander in the Pacific, one in the Mediterranean and one in Europe. Later, the British would set up the British Pacific Fleet to take part in the invasion of Japan if the Japanese failed to surrender, as was feared. The British Pacific Fleet was based in Sydney, and Prince Philip was one of the sailors on one of those ships. They had a forward base on Manus. This was a formidable Commonwealth fleet with 4 battleships, 6 fleet aircraft carriers, 15 smaller aircraft carriers, 11 cruisers, and numerous smaller warships, submarines, and support vessels. So never say and never agree that the British abandoned us as the British haters wrongly claim, led by Paul Keating, who made a similar claim in Parliament. He was wrong, absolutely wrong. Fortunately, the British, a close ally, decided not to react. I'm David Flint, and I'm from Australians for Constitutional Monarchy. Until next time.